Welcome back, everybody. Want to start off the video by just reminding you, get in on the gear giveaway, comment on this video, any of the videos we've put up in 2021. We've got some Maven optics that we're going to be giving on our first giveaway. In about a week, we're going to announce our first winner. So make sure you get in on that. Also, the Kansas whitetail hunt giveaway. Go to alphabowhunting.com. Every $5 you spend gets you one entry in for that whitetail, and that's going to be given away April 15th. So we started the topic of arrow builds, right, on the last video, and we're going to continue with that here on this one. And kind of where I want to start with this, because there's so many different rabbit holes you can go down with arrow builds, and I kind of want to start off by just stating 2 or 3 quick things that generalize everything. And first off, there's no perfect arrow build, right?
Not at all.
Too many moving parts, too much subjectivity to the topic, and so that's kind of number one. Number two, I think, in my opinion, accuracy is always paramount. I don't think that should be debated or argued. I just really don't. I mean, I think because of that, people build arrows to potential worst case scenarios, yep. Right? So where we want to go with on this first video is that if we're talking about arrow weight to start off with, everything in archery is give and take. If you look at things on a spectrum, you move the needle one way, it's going to take away from something else. So as we talk about arrow weights specifically, we talked about your arrows that you yep. prefer and some of the other people in the shop, and I think we're all very similar to where I myself kind of find myself in that 450-ish to 500 grain range, and in some cases for certain animals down closer to 400 grain range. But that being said, let's talk about arrow weight for a little bit, Bo. And yeah. As we talk about obviously adding arrow weight, there's a ton of benefits to that, right?
Sure.
Momentum.
Yep.
Worst case scenario, you hit a bone, depending, and we're not going to talk about broadheads on this video. This is just more the weight of the arrow. You start adding qualities and benefits, it quiets your bow down. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, what are some of the other things that of a heavy arrow build this benefit's going to give you? I mean, other than, I guess, those 2 basic ones: momentum, quiet your bow down, and
I mean, you could argue wind drift.
Okay, good one there, and that's a whole different video as well, because I've heard people poo-poo micro diameter shafts. You like that? Threw poo-poo in the video, and I from a penetration standpoint, I don't think there's a whole bunch of value on micro diameter.
The broadhead cuts a larger hole than the arrow shaft, so the aspect of friction of the shaft. Come on,
exactly.
Let's get over it.
But when you start talking about the terrain you're hunting and the animal you're hunting, if you're hunting long range shots in possible wind drift situations, a smaller profile is going to catch less wind. There's not an argue point to that, right? So depending on the animal you're hunting, and I want to kind of circle back real quick. A lot of this is what we go over in our all-day workshops, and there's a lot of moving parts, so we try to help organize and simplify the process to get to where you want to go. Create a baseline, adjust one thing, and then test and see if it works out. So going back to the arrow weight thing, we got a couple mock builds that we've actually built for people before, sight tapes, and we checked some of the numbers on the Archer's Advantage program. So, Bo, when we're talking about somebody that opts for more speed, okay, mm-hmm. One of the bow setups we looked at was 300 feet per second.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And roughly what kind of arrow weight was in that? I don't remember exactly.
It was a 413 grain arrow out of like a 73-pound bow.
So right 27 and a half inch, right? So yep. we had a lot of comments of people talking about, hey, I'm 27, I'm 27 and a half. And as you start looking at what happens when you have a 27 and a half inch draw length person, right? You have to lighten up your arrow weight and have a bow that's doing pretty good performance.
In order to get speed.
Speed. Yep. So as you talk about on the flip side of that, the other arrow build we built was like a 550 grain arrow.
Yeah.
Ish, right? Yep. 255 feet per second,
yep.
Roughly is what that scenario was. Yep. And as we start looking at just one of the factors there, and it's the arrow drop. When people say speed doesn't matter, okay, here's 2 situations that we always bring up to people where we say speed does matter. Where it falls in your priority list, that's up for you to decide. But if you're going to potentially draw your bow back on an animal, spot and stock situation, still hunting situation, animal pops up from its bed or what have you. You have enough time to load an arrow, draw back, but you don't have enough time to range before you do that.
Yep.
How far are you comfortable judging distance out to potentially take a shot? Maybe you're not comfortable. It's good to know, but maybe somebody says, I'm good out to 40. Okay, so in this situation, hypothetical again, draw your bow back, no range, you guess the target at 40 yards.
Yep.
The shooter A with a 300 feet per second bow, you got an arrow drop at 40 yards of 1.6?
1.6 inches.
Per yard,
Per
okay?
yard, yep.
So let's say that hypothetical again, you missed the mark by 3 yards, so now you're 4.5, just shy of 5 inches worth of a miss. Potentially, if you break a perfect shot, we might still be in the vital or close to the vital.
Yeah, I mean you're hugging the line, realistically.
So, and that's a fast shooting bow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, for sure.
You take shooter B at 255 feet per second, 550 grain arrow. We're at 2.2.
Yeah, it was 2.3.
2.3
Yep.
worth of drop per inch. So that same shooter now just missed, if they broke a perfect shot, by over 6 inches, right? 6.5 inches. So now let's compound that and say you didn't break a perfect shot, and or let's just say you have a best case scenario, your effective range, you test stuff, and your group size at 40 yards is about a 3-inch group size. So if you potentially shot towards the worst end of your group size there, 1.5 inch miss, compound that plus the arrow drop of 6.5 inches, you may miss the target depending on where the animal moves.
Yeah, on a deer-sized target, absolutely, you'd miss it clean.
So tell me that speed doesn't matter, and we're showing you right now where it does matter, right?
Yeah.
So in addition to that, let's take it out a little further. Okay, let's say you're willing to shoot an animal out to 60 yards, and let's say that you range that target at 60. Maybe you dial your sight, or you already have a 60-yard pin, and that animal takes a step, or maybe a step and a half returns, and you think that it's 60 still good, bigger size target. Maybe it just moved 2 to 3 yards on one step, right?
Yeah.
Step and a half, whatever.
Elk
it
definitely
moved.
could do that.
Looks like it moved laterally, but it could be quartering away slightly.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about how much? The 300 feet per second shooter?
Yeah, so
I think I got some cheat
I think
sheet.
you have it written down. I know
2.4
inches in per yard.
Per yard.
We're going to preface that.
So let's just say we're 2 yards. Let's say that animal moved 2 yards, and at 60 yards, we're 2.5 inches per yard now. So 60 is actually 62. You just missed by 5 inches there, okay, for that distance. And that's shooting 300 feet per second. So the shooter that's shooting a 255 grain arrow, 255 feet per second,
Yep.
you're 3.3 inches. So 2 yards,
yard.
you just
Per
missed
yard.
almost 7 inches worth of a miss based off of an error that can happen to anybody.
Assuming that the shot was flawless.
Perfect, again. Now let's take and compound it again. Maybe your best group size is 5 inches at 60 yards. Pretty dang good shooter to hold broadheads in 5-inch group,
Yeah.
60 yards, right? So 2.5 inches on top of 7 inches. Come on, guys, that's 9.5. I mean, you're talking about a huge miss.
Even on an elk-sized target, we're pushing the envelope.
Wounding.
For sure.
If not missing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, and just note that we're not in the boat of, speed is not number one in either one of our categories.
You said it perfectly at the beginning of the video. You go on one extreme, you're going to lose on another.
Yep.
So again, yes, we could be talking about speed and trying to go super fast because then you get that room for yardage. Maybe now your arrow doesn't have enough energy at those distances. So you got to take that into account. You got to test your limitations out in your group size, what you feel like your effective range is, and maybe judging some targets to really narrow you down to be a well-rounded bow hunter.
And that's where, go back to square one of the video here. There's no perfect arrow build, right? You're on a spectrum where you're going to gain some on one category, or you're going to probably take away from somewhere else. And like I said, that's going to lead us into the next video that we're going to talk about in this series, where we get into the penetration and or broadhead selection in conjunction with a few other things. And that's just kind of the next rabbit hole we're going to dive through. But just note this: speed is important, accuracy is paramount. I mean,
100%.
There's no regardless on the shot angle or the animal position, excuse me, is the word I'm looking for. Regardless of where that animal stands, if it's perfectly broadside, or if you're somebody that decides to take a frontal shot at a certain rate, whatever the case is, accuracy is paramount, because like Bo and I were talking about, if you break a perfect shot and you're off a yard or 2 yards or 3 yards in certain situations because of a yardage judgment mistake or the animal moved, if you don't break a perfect shot there, then you're hoping for the best. It's what's
Cross your
happening.
fingers at that point, man.
100%. So regardless how much FOC your arrow has, how much total arrow grains your arrow weighs, all that is secondary at that point based off of where your shot broke. So just started to dive into this process with the arrow build, like I said, because we're not saying we're right either. We're just trying to paint the whole picture. And in painting the whole picture, we're probably going to confuse people a little bit more.
Yeah.
But anyway, speed's important. Arrow weight is also important. Find out where you fit in the spectrum. Yep. And I guess I'll lead into a little bit of what we talk about in our workshops is specific to animal. If you got one bow you're going to build for everything, I would pick my probably the largest or the most dense bone size animal that I'm going to hunt with, elk, right? Yeah, and prepare for that. And then kind of work from there. You know, have a starting point. If you're going to have 2 arrow builds or 2 bow builds, well then cater each one towards the species you want to hunt, and then in the terrain you're going to hunt them. Yep. Because if you're going to be hunting mule deer, hike above tree line, you might be looking at shots that are in your second third or your last third of your effective range, pushing the envelope. So now we're talking about trajectory is important. We're talking about flight characteristics, wind drift. Anyway, next video, stay tuned. Don't forget to comment below, and again, pay attention to the series from a standpoint of maybe there's some topics that you haven't considered, or maybe you didn't know. I mean, you can get on Archer's Advantage, get a membership, start plugging your setup in there, tweaking numbers, seeing how the speed changes. Go look at the air trajectory, uphill, downhill. Mess with all this stuff. That's the kind of research you should be doing if you really want to geek out on an arrow build.
For sure, 100%.
And don't ever think that you're going to pick the right one. You're going to have to get out, test it, shoot some 3D, go hunt some animals with it, and develop an opinion for yourself, and go from there. So thanks for checking us out, and comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys soon.